remiss to not bring on our next guest here. We have Meghann Cuniff, a legal affairs journalist. Megan, I feel like we've been through so much with all these court cases that we've seen.
Definitely. There's been a lot happening in 2023 for sure. There definitely was no dearth of cases to talk about.
Oh, yeah. And we're going to talk about your top 3 picks. And I don't know if it was tough for you to pick, but these made some stunning headlines. So the first one that we want to show is the conviction against Tory Lanez in this scandalous Megan Thee Stallion shooting. Tory, you know what? I'm not even going to say anything because I'm going to let you take it away. Tell us about it.
Yeah, he was convicted in December 2022, but then 2023 really became the year of Tory Lanez in court because there was so much activity regarding his post-conviction proceedings. He had a motion for a new trial that really stretched out for a number of months and got a lot of attention, especially in the social media circles. So it took a while for the judge to finally hear that, and he rejected it, which is pretty common. It would be really rare for a defendant in Lanez's situation to actually get a new trial in the trial court like that. So then we went on to sentencing. So he was finally sentenced in August. But along the way, there was, the release of some emails between him and his original attorney, prior counsel, that kind of revealed some insider information about the case strategy that was really a big talker online, because his big defense in the trial was that he was not the shooter, that it was actually the other person who was there that night, who was Megan's friend at the time, Kelsey Harris. Tory Lanez's lawyer did the full-on Tory Lanez is wrongly accused and the shooter is Kelsey Harris. And some emails that we got that were revealed through the motion for new trial process showed that his original lawyer, Sean Hawley, who is an experienced celebrity criminal defense attorney in Los Angeles, actually wrote him an email a couple weeks before the trial was to begin and told him that she didn't think that blaming Kelsey was a viable strategy for it and for his defense. And she even went so far as to tell him that if he wanted to pursue that strategy, he should look for another lawyer who'd be willing to take that on. So that was really an explosive thing, especially for people who've been covering the case forever. They were really interested in the details on that. But then also from a legal standpoint, it was so unusual to get a peek inside these attorney-client communications between Tory and his original lawyer that really got a lot of attention from both the hip-hop industry, but then also the LA legal affairs community who knows Sean Hawley and follows this kind of litigation.
Yeah, I just want to post up here a Tory Lanez on the left, Megan Thee Stallion. Well, all right, now they flip-flopped, but it's such a crazy case, Megan, because 10 years in prison. So many people were just baffled by that entire prison sentence that he was given. But you see here that obviously Megan is suffering just a lot of emotional trauma from this entire case, especially bringing this forth against Tory Lanez because he has a pretty big fan base.
Yes, and I had heard initially after he was convicted of first-degree assault with a firearm, and there's a enhancement for causing great bodily harm. She had bullet shrapnel in her feet that were actually removed by surgeons. So there's, I think, a debate online about how badly injured she was, but legally the jury did return a finding of great bodily harm. So just those charges and convictions in California were enough to put him in the possible double-digit realm for a sentence, I had heard. And prosecutors had actually requested 13 years in prison. So the judge gave him a break. According to prosecutors, the judge gave him a break by only giving him 10 years. But of course, his attorneys were making the argument that he should have gotten only probation for this or the low end of the sentencing of 2 or 3 years. And they were making legal arguments that he had a mental disorder stemming from the death of his mother when he was young, had alcoholism and post-traumatic stress disorder from that. So that should qualify as a unusual circumstance that would warrant a lower sentence. But obviously the judge didn't do that. So, I think a lot of people were maybe surprised by the 10 years, but then there were a lot of people who, kind of were expecting to see something like that, some kind of lengthy sentence like that.
All right, Megan, I do want to move on to another topic here because, like I said, you have really detailed so many of these big breaking cases. And the next one that you did send to us is one that also, I think, has shocked so many people. And that's the case against Danny Masterson. We just got this week, actually, his mugshot release. So go ahead, tell our viewers just the big takeaways from this entire trial in general.
Yeah, and he was convicted back in May of 2 counts of forcible rape involving 2 women back in 2003. And it was actually a second trial. He'd been on trial last fall, and the jury was not able to reach a decision. They actually deadlocked on all the charges. So I think his lawyers and especially Danny Masterson had some hope that they would be able to go into the second trial and perhaps get an acquittal. But trials usually, almost always, retrials favor the prosecutors, and the prosecutors were able to tighten their case and bring in some new especially an expert witness to talk about the Church of Scientology, which Danny Masterson has been a member of for a long time, and the victims had ties to the Church of Scientology too. So one big aspect in the case was the length of time between the crimes and the trial. We're talking about a 20-year period here, and prosecutors were able to use information and testimony about Scientology and the Church of Scientology, the secrecy that goes on in there, and kind of the fact that the church has its own real justice system. They were able to use that testimony to kind of help explain the gap between the charges in 2003 and the trial in 2023. So that was a big difference between the first and second case. And it was enough. The second trial, everything the prosecutors did was enough to persuade the jury to return 2 convictions. They did still split on a third charge, but the 2 convictions were enough to put them away for 15 years apiece. And that's what the judge did. She said 30 years to life. So that means he won't even be eligible for parole until 30 years. Though the prosecutors did say that given his age, he's 47 now, that his actual first shot at release from prison might be under a California state law regarding elderly people in prison, compassionate care release. So it's definitely looking at a couple of decades for him. And this really was the end of a long era for this case. And then for the people who've been watching the Danny Masterson allegations on the internet, on TV, through some of the activity that we've seen, it's just been a long time coming for everyone.
And Megan, I've been playing these kind of reported roundups that we have, and on the most scandalous ones that I played, it was the Danny Masterson headline, and also how Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher kind of got dragged into this firestorm against them after they wrote those letters of character in favor of Masterson.
Yes, and that was a big thing. That I'm doing a roundup right now of my top 10 stories on the website, and of course that was a big one at legalaffairsandtrials.com. Was we actually got the letters that Ashton and Mila wrote, and I think it was pretty clear, especially from the way they reacted to the backlash that they got, that they weren't expecting these to be made public, and they were, and there was so much attention to them and questions about their judgment about why they would do that. And of course Ashton's involvement in his role in the human trafficking organization, the sex trafficking organization that he co-founded, was such a big part of that he actually stepped down from that later. So it was a big moment for the criminal justice system's use of those letters. I think so many people who heard about those letters and read about those letters were surprised that this went on. I think some people who pay attention to the court system and follow criminal defense sentencings are aware that that's a pretty common process, but just to see them in such a high profile case, and then what the charges were, having a rape case like that, I think really shocks some people that these letters are so common, and that people write them pretty regularly.
Finally, Megan, I want to get to your third story that you told me would make this list of like top 3, but of course, I mean, you're writing top 10 because there were so many, but you did pick this next one. I want to showcase this tweet about a former Dodgers pitcher, Trevor Bauer. Go ahead and tell us about this case and why you feel it's one of the most memorable cases that you covered in 2023.
Yeah, that got so much attention when he settled his defamation lawsuit, and he had a lot of text messages and statements to say about his accuser that really made it look like this was such a one-sided settlement, that she'd given up on her case and wanted to settle because of the damning text messages. But of course, there was so much going on in the litigation that I was aware of, just having even gone to some of the hearings in Santa Ana, California, that I knew there was just a lot more to it. So I was able to dig through the litigation on that and really show what had happened, and the fact that he has other public accusers that were actually being brought into the case. The judge, a magistrate judge, had actually ruled that they could be deposed and have their testimony taken. The other accusers could be used as part of Lindsay Hill's case against him. So there was just a lot of information in there to go over. And then also, I was able to get the 27-minute recording of Lindsay Hill calling Trevor Bauer under the guise of just a phone call after this had happened. But it was actually being recorded by the police. She'd already gone to Pasadena police and reported being sexually assaulted. So the police put her up to this phone call, and were sitting next to her, kind of coaching her and writing down things for her to say to him. And it was the pretext call for something that, perhaps the police were trying to see if they would bring criminal charges against him. But releasing the call was really the first time that you would hear Trevor Bauer and Lindsay Hill actually talking to each other together shortly after this encounter happened. And you got to actually hear them yourself, and hear Lindsay herself, and hear Trevor himself, and hear the things that he acknowledged in his statements, and just the way that they talk to each other. Because part of Trevor Bauer's defense on this was that these injuries were made up by Lindsay, and that they had to have happened after she left his house. And the conversation kind of goes over the timeline on that, and talks about her sending him photos, and he expresses surprise at the photos and things like that. So there's just a lot in there to go over, and a lot of details that really come to life in the phone call that we wouldn't have had if it hadn't been released like that.
Megan, interesting to note a bit that the top three cases that you told me you wanted to talk about today really involved these high-profile men committing assaults against women.
Yeah, that was a theme this year for some of the celebrity cases, and the ones that are being filed in LA and are really going into litigation and getting a lot of attention. That seems to be a theme over the last few years nationally, and I'm not sure if it's something that's going to let up in 2024. I think we've seen a huge rush of these cases just in the last couple of months. We've talked about so many involving different celebrities that 2024 is going to be the year that a lot of those cases really get going in court. So I think we're going to be seeing more of that. And unfortunately, it's just a common thing in society, and also something that I think really gets a lot of people's attention when they hear about it.
Truly tragic, really. Megan, I would be remiss if I didn't ask what you're most looking forward to cover in 2024. I know that there's a lot of trials that you really are keeping your eye on, and these things take months, so long. So tell us, what are you most looking forward to see develop and kind of just dissect going forward?
There's so much going on. We've got ASAP Rocky, the rapper who's charged with first-degree assault. We're expecting to hear a trial date on him soon. We've got Hunter Biden, who's actually charged with some tax evasion, tax fraud charges in LA federal court. He's going to be arraigned soon. We have an LA politician who pleaded guilty to turning his city council district into a racketeering enterprise over a number of years that involved bribery with real estate developers, that kind of thing. He's going to be sentenced in January, and feds are asking for 13 years. He's asking for 9 years. There's actually a possibility that the judge might say, I think he deserves more than ever really slows down in Los Angeles. The cases that we've talked about are still going to be going on, and I'm expecting to hear more stuff like that. Like the ASAP Rocky trial, I think will be a big one if it does go in 2024
Meghann Cuniff.
And then also,
go on.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm worried I had a little bit of an unstable internet connection there.
Yes. No worries, though. You know how we are here at Live TV.
really focusing on yeah, I'll really be focusing on my website, legalaffairsandtrials.com, and building that up and really turning it into a hub for court documents about celebrity cases, but also big LA federal cases. Because I think there's so many interesting criminal cases in LA federal court that don't get the attention, but really, really can teach the public a lot about the criminal justice system.
I'm glad you pointed that out. Everyone that does want to follow Meghann, follow her, Meghannn Cuniff, on Twitter. She has got all the updates on the big cases, legalaffairsandtrials.com. And you have been such a great resource this past 2023, Meghann. I want to thank you for all the time you've spent with us here, keeping our viewers up to date on some pretty high-profile cases, convictions, and decisions. We look forward to connecting with you again in 2024.
Thank you so much.